Alara Whitmore's hands trembled as the ballroom doors swung open, because she already knew something was wrong the moment she saw the crowd part like water around a stone. Candles burned bright along the walls, gold light spilling over silk gowns and polished boots, but none of it mattered. Her eyes had already found him. Duke Alaric Sinclair stood at the center of the floor, his arm wrapped around the waist of a woman who was not his bride. Lady Vivian Ashcroft laughed at something he whispered, her head tilted back, her fingers curled against his chest, as if she owned him completely. Alara stopped walking. The music kept playing, violins weaving through the air, but she could not move her feet another step. Around her, whispers rose like smoke, quiet at first, then sharper, hissing through fans and gloved hands. Everyone in that room had come to watch her engagement be announced. Instead, they were watching her fiancé forget she existed. She forced herself to breathe. A lady did not fall apart in public, no matter how deep the wound. Her mother had taught her that lesson since childhood, repeated it like a prayer whenever life threatened to embarrass the family name. Alara straightened her shoulders and walked forward, chin high, though her heart pounded so hard she feared everyone could hear it. Alaric noticed her only when she was a few feet away. He blinked, as though surprised she had arrived at all, then offered a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Alara," he said, releasing Vivian's waist with obvious reluctance. "You look well." "Thank you," Alara replied, her voice steady, despite the storm inside her chest. "I did not realize the evening's entertainment had already begun without me." A few nearby guests exchanged glances, unsure whether to laugh or gasp. Vivian's smile faltered for half a second, before she recovered it, tilting her chin with practiced grace. "Lady Alara, how lovely. Alaric was just telling me how excited he is for tonight." "Was he?" Alara said flatly, and for a moment, silence stretched between the three of them like a held breath. Alaric cleared his throat, glancing toward the crowd who pretended not to watch. "Shall we dance then? To celebrate the announcement?" Alara wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, to spare herself further humiliation. But refusing would only give the gossips more to feast on, more proof that the betrothal was cracking before it had even begun. She placed her gloved hand in his, feeling the coldness of the gesture more than any warmth. They danced. Alaric's steps were correct, his posture perfect, yet his eyes drifted more than once toward Vivian, who watched them from the edge of the floor, with a satisfaction Alara found almost unbearable. The music swelled, but Alara felt nothing, except the growing weight of humiliation pressing on her chest, heavier with every turn. When the dance ended, Alaric bowed and excused himself almost immediately, claiming he needed to greet an old friend. Alara watched him cross the room straight to Vivian's side, taking her hand, as if the last few minutes with his bride had been nothing more than an obligation to fulfill, before returning to where he truly wished to be. Alara stood alone amid the crowd, smiling faintly because that was expected of her, while inside, she felt something break quietly, like glass cracking beneath pressure no one else could see. She excused herself from a cluster of chattering guests and moved toward the edge of the ballroom, desperate for air, desperate for a moment where no one was watching her pretend everything was fine. The terrace doors were open, moonlight spilling across the stone floor outside. Alara slipped through them, grateful for the cool night air against her flushed cheeks. She walked to the railing and gripped it tightly, staring out at the dark garden below, willing herself not to cry. Tears would ruin everything. Tears would give the whispers inside more fuel than they already had. "You handled that with more grace than most men in that room deserve," a low voice said from behind her. Alara turned sharply, startled. A tall man stood near the terrace doors, half in shadow, half in moonlight. She recognized him immediately, though they had never spoken directly before. Duke Riston Blackwood. Society spoke of him often, always in careful tones, for he was known to attend few events and speak even less. Some called him cold, others called him unreadable. Standing before her now, his dark eyes steady and calm, he looked neither. "Forgive me," Alara said, straightening her posture. "I did not realize anyone else was out here." "I saw you leave," Ristan admitted, stepping closer, though he kept a respectful distance. "I imagine most of the ballroom saw what happened before you did." Her cheeks burned, though this time not from embarrassment alone. "You mean my fiancé publicly ignoring me at our own engagement ball?" "I mean exactly that. His tone carried no pity, which surprised her. Most people who spoke to her tonight would likely offer sympathy dripping with judgment, secretly delighted by the scandal unfolding before them. Rystan's voice held neither, only quiet observation. It takes considerable strength to walk back into a room like that with your head held high. Ilara studied him for a moment, unsure how to respond. She was used to false comfort, empty words meant to smooth over uncomfortable truths. This felt different. Strength or foolishness, she said finally. I am not certain which. Perhaps both, Rystan said, and for the briefest moment, something like the shadow of a smile crossed his face. Though I suspect most people in your position would have fled the ball entirely, rather than dance with him. And what would you know of my position, Your Grace? Only what I witnessed, he said simply. A woman treated poorly, in front of everyone who matters to her family's name, choosing composure over collapse. That is not nothing. Ilara turned back toward the garden, unwilling to let him see how deeply his words had settled into her, how they loosened something tight in her chest, that she had been holding since the moment she walked through those ballroom doors. You are kinder than your reputation suggests, Your Grace. My reputation is often exaggerated, he replied. I simply prefer honesty to flattery. Society rarely rewards it, but I find I sleep better at night. A faint, unexpected laugh escaped her, surprising them both. That is refreshing to hear, given the evening I have had. They stood together in silence for a moment, the distant sound of music drifting from the ballroom behind them, mixing with the quiet rustle of wind through the garden hedges. Ilara found herself unwilling to return inside just yet, unwilling to face the curious stares and whispered questions that surely awaited her. May I ask you something, Lady Ilara? Rystan said after a pause. You may. Do you love him? The question startled her, blunt and unexpected, yet not unkind. She considered lying, offering the polite answer society expected of a bride-to-be. Instead, she found herself telling the truth, perhaps because the night had already stripped away every pretense she usually wore. I do not know, she admitted quietly. I have known him since childhood. Our families arranged this match years ago. I hoped, in time, that affection might grow between us. Tonight has made me question whether that hope was ever realistic. Rystan nodded slowly, as though her answer confirmed something he already suspected. Hope is not foolish, Lady Ilara, but hope built on someone unwilling to meet it halfway rarely survives long. You speak as though you understand a great deal about disappointment, Your Grace. I have had my share, he said simply, offering no further explanation, though something flickered behind his eyes that suggested deeper history than he cared to share tonight. The terrace doors opened again, and a young woman peeked out, clearly searching for someone. Lady Ilara, your mother is asking for you. She wishes to introduce you to Lord Pembroke before supper. Ilara sighed quietly, the reality of the evening pulling her back from whatever brief peace she had found on that terrace. I must return inside, she said to Rystan. Thank you, Your Grace, for your honesty tonight. It was unexpectedly comforting. Take care, Lady Ilara, Rystan said, inclining his head respectfully. I hope the rest of your evening proves kinder than its beginning. She turned and walked back toward the ballroom, but before crossing the threshold, she glanced back once. Rystan remained where he stood, watching her with an expression she could not quite name, something between curiosity and quiet concern, as though he could not look away even now that their conversation had ended. Inside, the ball continued its bright, glittering performance, oblivious to the quiet moment that had passed between them outside. Ilara found her mother near the refreshment table, engaged in conversation with an elderly gentleman whose name she barely registered through the fog of exhaustion settling over her. She offered polite smiles, murmured appropriate responses, and endured the introduction with practiced patience, though her mind kept drifting back to the terrace, to the calm certainty in Rystan's voice, so unlike the careless indifference she had grown used to from Alaric. Across the room, Alaric remained close to Vivian's side for most of the evening, occasionally glancing toward Ilara with something like guilt flickering across his features, though never enough to pull him away from her company for long. Ilara noticed, of course. Everyone noticed. The whispers had not stopped since the moment she walked into the ballroom, and they showed no sign of fading before the night ended. By the time the ball concluded and carriages began lining the street outside, Ilara felt utterly drained, her cheeks aching from hours of forced smiles. her chest tight with unspoken humiliation she had swallowed again and again throughout the evening. As she climbed into her family's carriage, her mother settled beside her, silent for a long moment before finally speaking. "You handled tonight well," her mother said quietly. "Better than I expected, given the circumstances." Alara stared out the carriage window, watching the glowing windows of the townhouse fade into darkness as they pulled away. "I do not feel as though I handled anything, Mother. I feel as though I merely survived it." "Sometimes survival is enough," her mother replied gently. "Tomorrow we will decide how to address what happened. Tonight, you need only rest." Alara nodded, though rest felt impossibly far away. Her mind kept circling back to the terrace, to Riston's steady presence in the moonlight, to the quiet strength in his voice when he told her that composure was not nothing. She wondered, as the carriage rattled over cobblestones toward home, whether she would ever encounter him again, and why, despite everything else troubling her tonight, that particular thought lingered longest of all. The following morning arrived far too quickly. Alara woke to sunlight streaming through her curtains and the quiet murmur of servants moving through the house below. For a brief, peaceful moment, she forgot everything that had happened the night before. Then memory returned, all at once, sharp and unwelcome, and she buried her face into her pillow with a groan. A soft knock sounded at her door before her lady's maid, a kind young woman named Bridget, entered with a tray of tea and toast. "Good morning, my lady. Your mother wishes to speak with you once you are dressed." Alara sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. "Is the whole house already discussing last night?" Bridget hesitated, setting the tray down carefully. "I would not say the whole house, my lady. Only most of it." Despite everything, Alara managed a tired laugh. "Wonderful. I suppose that is preferable to the entire city." "I fear that may already be true as well," Bridget admitted gently. "Word travels quickly among circles such as these." Alara sighed, accepting the inevitable. By midday, every drawing room in the city would likely be buzzing with the story of the Duke, who ignored his bride in favor of his mistress at their own engagement ball. She dressed quickly, choosing a simple morning gown, and made her way downstairs to find her mother waiting in the small sitting room, a folded letter resting in her lap. "This arrived an hour ago," her mother said, holding up the letter. "From Duke Sinclair." Alara's stomach tightened. "What does it say?" Her mother handed it over without comment. Alara unfolded the paper carefully, scanning Alaric's familiar handwriting. The letter offered a brief, formal apology for what he called an unfortunate misunderstanding at the ball, along with an assurance that nothing between them had changed and that he looked forward to their continued engagement moving forward. Alara read it twice, searching for any hint of genuine remorse beneath the careful, practiced wording. She found none. "He apologizes for a misunderstanding," she said quietly, folding the letter closed, "as though I imagined the entire evening." "Men often choose the easiest explanation available to them," her mother said carefully. "It does not excuse his behavior, Alara, but it may explain his approach to addressing it. What do you think I should do, Mother?" Her mother was quiet for a long moment, studying her daughter's face carefully. "I think you already know what you wish to do. The question is whether you believe you are permitted to do it." Alara considered this, turning the folded letter over in her hands. The betrothal had been arranged long before she had any say in the matter, built on family alliances and practical considerations rather than affection. She had accepted it because it was expected of her, because refusing carried consequences far greater than her own personal happiness. Yet after last night, after watching Alaric choose another woman so openly, so carelessly, in front of everyone who mattered, she wondered how much longer she could continue pretending that acceptance came easily. "I do not know what I am permitted to do," Alara admitted finally. "But I know what happened last night cannot simply be forgiven with a letter and a few careful words." Her mother nodded slowly, though she offered no further guidance, leaving Alara alone with her thoughts as the morning stretched on. Alara spent much of the day indoors, avoiding calls from curious acquaintances eager to hear her account of the previous evening firsthand. She had no interest in repeating the humiliation for their entertainment, no matter how sympathetically they framed their questions. By afternoon, restless and unable to settle her thoughts, Alara asked for the carriage to be prepared for a short ride through the nearby park. The fresh air, she hoped, might clear her mind, or at least offer temporary distraction from the whirlwind of emotions still churning inside her since the previous night. The park was quiet at this hour, few carriages passing along the winding paths, few pedestrians strolling beneath the tall trees lining the walkways. Ilara instructed her driver to slow their pace, content simply to watch the scenery pass by the window, her thoughts drifting despite her best efforts to keep them still. It was there, quite unexpectedly, that she saw him again. Duke Riston Blackwood walked alone along the path bordering the pond, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression thoughtful and distant, as though lost in considerations far removed from his surroundings. Ilara hesitated only a moment before instructing her driver to stop the carriage. She stepped down carefully, smoothing her skirts, suddenly uncertain whether approaching him was wise, given everything already being whispered about her name. Yet something about their conversation on the terrace lingered persistently in her mind, refusing to be dismissed as simple politeness between strangers. Ristan noticed her almost immediately, pausing his walk as she approached. "Lady Ilara," he said, inclining his head respectfully. "I did not expect to encounter you again so soon." "Nor did I expect to seek you out," she admitted honestly, "though I find myself grateful for the coincidence." A faint smile touched his features, brief but genuine. "How are you faring, after everything?" "Tired," she said simply. "And uncertain. Duke Sinclair sent a letter this morning, offering an apology that felt more like an excuse." Ristan's expression sharpened slightly, though his voice remained calm. "That does not surprise me, unfortunately." "You seem to know him well," Ilara observed. "Well enough," Ristan replied carefully. "We have crossed paths on occasion throughout the years. I will say only that his behavior last night, while disappointing, was not entirely out of character." Ilara studied him for a long moment, curious despite herself. "You speak carefully, Your Grace, as though choosing your words with great deliberation. I find it wise to choose words carefully when discussing another man's private affairs, particularly when that man is engaged to someone I have only recently met, yet already find myself concerned for." Something in his tone made her pulse quicken unexpectedly. "Concerned, Your Grace?" "Perhaps that is not the correct word," he admitted, glancing briefly toward the pond before returning his gaze to her. "Though I confess, I have thought of our conversation last night more than once since we parted." Ilara felt heat rise in her cheeks, though she was uncertain whether it stemmed from embarrassment or something else entirely, something she was not yet prepared to name. "I have thought of it as well," she admitted quietly. It was, perhaps, the only honest exchange I experienced the entire evening. They walked together along the path for a while, their conversation drifting easily between lighter topics, though beneath the surface, Ilara remained acutely aware of the strange, unfamiliar comfort she felt in his company, so different from the careful, guarded interactions she usually endured within society's expectations. When it came time to part, Ristan escorted her back toward her waiting carriage, offering his hand to help her step inside. "Thank you, Your Grace," Ilara said, settling into her seat, "for your company this afternoon." "The pleasure was entirely mine, Lady Ilara," he replied, stepping back as the carriage door closed. "I hope our paths cross again soon." As the carriage pulled away, Ilara glanced back once more, watching him standing there beneath the trees, his gaze following her departure with quiet intensity. She turned forward again, settling back against the cushioned seat, her mind occupied not with Alaric's careless letter or the whispers still circulating through the city, but with the steady, thoughtful presence of a man she barely knew, yet somehow already trusted more than her own betrothed. The carriage rattled homeward through the fading afternoon light, and Ilara found herself smiling faintly, despite everything, wondering quietly what tomorrow might bring, and whether the ache in her chest from last night's humiliation might finally begin, slowly, to ease. News of the engagement ball spread through the city faster than Ilara could have imagined. By the second morning, calling cards piled up on the entry table, each one attached to a note dripping with false concern, every visitor eager to hear the scandal firsthand from her own lips. Ilara refused most of them, choosing instead to remain in the quiet of her family's townhouse, though she knew the whispers would not stop simply because she declined to feed them. Her younger brother, Edwin, burst into the drawing room that afternoon with a newspaper clutched in his hand, his face flushed with barely contained anger. "Have you seen this?" he demanded, dropping the paper onto the table before her. Ilara picked it up carefully, scanning the society column until her eyes landed on a paragraph describing in carefully veiled language, the events of the engagement ball. The writer did not use names directly, but the description left no doubt about the identities involved. A certain duke, recently betrothed, was seen paying considerable attention to a lady other than his intended throughout the evening, much to the visible discomfort of his bride. They did not even bother to disguise it well, Alara said quietly, setting the paper down. How can you remain so calm about this? Edwin demanded. The entire city is laughing at our family's expense. Being angry will not undo what happened, Edwin, Alara said, though privately, she shared his frustration more than she cared to admit. Nor will shouting about it in the drawing room. Her brother sank into a nearby chair, running a hand through his hair. Father is furious. He spoke with Duke Sinclair's father this morning, demanding an explanation. And what explanation did he receive? The usual excuses, youthful indiscretion, nothing more than harmless friendship, misunderstood by onlookers. Edwin's tone made clear exactly how much weight he placed on such claims. Father does not believe it, but he is reluctant to break the betrothal outright. The alliance matters too much to him. Alara felt something tighten in her chest, though she was not entirely surprised. Her father had always valued practical alliances over personal happiness, a philosophy that had shaped every decision regarding her future since childhood. So I am simply expected to accept it then. To marry a man who cannot be bothered to hide his preference for another woman, even at our own engagement celebration. I do not believe that, Alara. I only tell you what Father said this morning. Edwin's voice softened. For what it is worth, I do not think you should marry him either. Alara offered her brother a tired smile, grateful for his support, even if it changed nothing about her circumstances. Thank you, Edwin. Though I fear my opinion on the matter carries less weight than Father's alliances. Later that evening, her father summoned her to his study, a rare occurrence that immediately set her nerves on edge. She found him seated behind his large oak desk, papers scattered before him, his expression unusually tired. Sit, Alara, he said, gesturing toward the chair across from him. She obeyed silently, folding her hands in her lap as she waited for him to speak. I imagine you have heard the talk circulating through the city. I have, Father. He sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. I spoke with Duke Sinclair's father this morning. He assures me the situation has been overstated, that Alaric harbors no true affection for Lady Ashcroft beyond old friendship. With respect, Father, I witnessed the evening myself. It did not appear to be simple friendship. Her father studied her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering across his weathered features. I know this marriage was not born of your own choosing, Alara. I know the circumstances have not been easy for you. But breaking this engagement now, after everything already arranged between our families, would carry consequences far beyond simple embarrassment. It could damage relationships built over generations. And what of my own future happiness, Father? Does that carry no weight in these considerations? Her father's expression softened slightly, though his resolve remained firm. Your happiness matters to me, Alara, more than you likely believe. But you were raised understanding the responsibilities that come with our family's position. I am asking you to consider proceeding with the engagement, at least until we better understand the full nature of the situation. Alara wanted to argue further, wanted to explain exactly how deeply Alaric's public disregard had wounded her, how difficult it felt to imagine a future built on such a foundation. Yet she recognized the futility of pressing the matter further tonight, her father's mind clearly set on preserving the alliance regardless of her personal reservations. I will consider it, Father, she said finally, though privately she felt anything but settled on the matter. Over the following days, Alara found herself increasingly drawn toward solitude, seeking refuge in quiet corners of the house, away from prying questions and unsolicited opinions. She spent hours in the small garden behind the townhouse, tending to flowers that required little attention beyond her presence, grateful for activities that demanded nothing more from her than simple, repetitive motion. It was during one such afternoon that Bridget approached her with an unexpected announcement. My lady, you have a visitor. Duke Sinclair has arrived and requests a moment of your time. Alara straightened immediately, setting aside her gardening tools. She had known this conversation would eventually become unavoidable, though she had hoped for a few more days before facing him directly. Send him to the drawing room. I will join him shortly. She took a few moments to compose herself before entering, smoothing her skirts and steadying her breathing. Alaric stood near the window when she entered, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression carefully neutral. "Elara," he said, turning as she entered. "Thank you for seeing me. I was uncertain whether I should," she admitted honestly, taking a seat across the room, deliberately choosing distance between them. Alaric's expression flickered with something like discomfort at her bluntness. "I understand my behavior at the ball caused you considerable embarrassment. I wish to apologize properly, in person, rather than through a letter." "Your letter mentioned a misunderstanding," Elara said evenly. "I confess I am curious what exactly was misunderstood about you spending the majority of our engagement celebration in the company of another woman." Alaric shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her direct gaze. "Vivienne and I have known each other since childhood. Our friendship has always drawn attention, though it has never been anything improper." "Friendship," Elara repeated, unable to fully mask the skepticism in her tone. "Alaric, I watched the way you looked at her throughout the evening. I do not believe friendship alone explains such attention." He was quiet for a long moment, and in that silence, Elara found more honesty than any words he had offered thus far. "I care for you, Elara," he said finally, though his voice lacked the conviction such a statement deserved. "Our families have always intended this match, and I have every intention of honoring that commitment." "Intention is not the same as affection, Alaric," Elara replied quietly. "I do not wish to spend my life married to a man whose heart remains elsewhere, regardless of his intentions to honor a family arrangement." Alaric's jaw tightened slightly, though he said nothing further on the matter, seemingly unwilling or unable to offer the reassurance she truly sought. Instead, he shifted the conversation toward practical matters, discussing wedding preparations already underway, venues being considered, guests being invited, as though the emotional weight of their earlier exchange had simply evaporated into more comfortable territory. Elara listened politely, offering minimal responses, her mind drifting elsewhere even as he spoke. When he finally rose to leave, he paused near the door, glancing back at her, with an expression she could not quite decipher. "I truly am sorry for how the ball unfolded, Elara," he said quietly. "I did not intend to cause you pain." "Intentions matter little when the pain has already been caused, Alaric," she replied, though her tone carried no anger, only weary resignation. He nodded slowly, then took his leave, and Elara remained seated in the drawing room long after his departure, staring at the empty doorway, wondering how she had arrived at a life so thoroughly shaped by decisions made without her genuine consent. That evening, restless and unable to settle her thoughts, Elara requested the carriage once more, choosing to visit her dear friend Margaret Ellison, whose steady company had provided comfort through countless difficult moments over the years. Margaret welcomed her warmly, ushering her into a cozy sitting room away from the household's usual bustle. "I have heard the talk, of course," Margaret said gently, once tea had been served, and they settled into comfortable chairs facing one another. "I am so sorry, Elara. You deserved far better treatment than what occurred at that ball." "Thank you, Margaret. Though I confess, the talk has grown exhausting to endure." "I imagine so." Margaret studied her friend carefully for a long moment. "May I ask you something rather direct?" "Of course. Do you truly wish to marry him, setting aside family obligations and practical considerations entirely? If the choice were yours alone, free from any outside pressure, would you still choose Alaric Sinclair as your husband?" Elara considered the question carefully, surprised by how quickly her answer formed despite the complexity of her circumstances. "No," she admitted quietly. "I do not believe I would." Margaret nodded slowly, unsurprised by the confession. "Then perhaps it is worth considering what you truly want, rather than simply what has been arranged for you." "It is not so simple as considering it, Margaret. My father remains committed to the alliance. Breaking the engagement now would carry consequences far beyond my own personal preferences." "Consequences exist either way, Elara. The question is, which consequences you find yourself more willing to endure? A life built on obligation toward a man who does not truly love you, or the temporary discomfort of disappointing your family's expectations?" Elara had no immediate answer for that, though Margaret's words lingered in her mind long after their conversation shifted toward lighter topics. As the evening wore on, and Elara eventually returned home, she found herself replaying the question repeatedly, unable to settle on a clear resolution, despite her friend's gentle encouragement toward honesty with herself. Days passed in this uneasy limbo, Ilara caught between family expectation and her own growing certainty that the engagement no longer represented a future she genuinely desired. Alaric called upon her twice more during this period, each visit polite but strained, neither of them addressing directly the deeper cracks now visible beneath the surface of their arrangement. It was during a chance encounter at a modest garden party hosted by a family friend that Ilara once again crossed paths with Duke Rhystan Blackwood. She had not expected to see him there, given his reputation for avoiding such gatherings. Yet there he stood, near the refreshment table, engaged in quiet conversation with an elderly gentleman she did not recognize. Their eyes met across the garden, and something in his expression shifted immediately upon recognizing her. A flicker of genuine pleasure quickly followed by careful composure befitting the public setting. He excused himself from his conversation and approached her, offering a respectful bow. "Lady Ilara, I did not expect to find you here." "Nor I you, Your Grace," she replied, offering a small, genuine smile, despite the weariness still clinging to her from recent days. "I understood such gatherings held little appeal for you." "Ordinarily, that would be true," Rhystan admitted, "though I confess, certain company has begun to make such events considerably more tolerable." Ilara felt warmth rise in her cheeks at the implication behind his words, though she chose not to comment directly upon it. "How have you been keeping yourself occupied since our last encounter, Your Grace?" "Managing estate matters mostly, though I will admit my thoughts have wandered more than once toward our conversation in the park." He studied her carefully for a moment. "You appear tired, Lady Ilara. Has the situation with Duke Sinclair improved at all?" Ilara hesitated, uncertain how much she wished to share, though something about his steady, patient presence encouraged honesty, rather than careful deflection. "Not particularly. My father remains committed to preserving the alliance, despite everything that occurred at the ball." Rhystan's expression grew thoughtful, though he chose his next words carefully. "May I offer an observation, Lady Ilara, without overstepping my place?" "Please do." "I have watched a great many arranged marriages over the years, born of practical necessity rather than genuine affection. Some manage to find contentment eventually, built slowly through mutual respect and shared purpose. Others remain hollow from beginning to end, each partner quietly resigned to a life lacking true companionship." He paused, meeting her gaze directly. "I suspect you already sense which path awaits you with Duke Sinclair, should the engagement proceed." Ilara felt something settle within her at his words, a quiet confirmation of thoughts she had struggled to fully articulate, even to herself. "You speak plainly, Your Grace. I find plain speech serves better than comfortable illusions, particularly when someone's future happiness remains at stake." His voice softened slightly. "Forgive me if I have overstepped, Lady Ilara. I simply find myself unable to remain silent when I see someone deserving of genuine happiness settling instead for obligation." "You need not apologize," Ilara said quietly. "I find your honesty rather refreshing, compared to the careful evasions I have grown accustomed to enduring." They spoke for several more minutes, their conversation drifting toward lighter subjects as other guests began approaching. Curious about the unusual sight of the reclusive Duke Blackwood, engaged in animated conversation at a social gathering he would ordinarily have avoided entirely. Eventually, propriety demanded they part ways, though as Ilara walked away, she found herself glancing back once more, meeting his steady gaze across the garden, something unspoken passing between them that neither dared name directly, yet both seemed to understand all the same. That night, lying awake in her bed long after the household had settled into silence, Ilara found herself contemplating Margaret's earlier question with renewed clarity. If the choice were truly hers alone, free from family obligation and practical alliance, she knew now, with growing certainty, that Alaric Sinclair was not the man she would choose to spend her life beside. Whether she possessed the courage to act upon that certainty, despite everything standing in opposition, remained a question she was not yet prepared to answer, though the seed of resolve had undeniably been planted, growing steadily stronger with each passing day. A week after the garden party, an invitation arrived that Ilara could not politely decline. Lady Winterbourne, a distant cousin of Alaric's family, was hosting a supper gathering meant to reassure society that the betrothal remained firmly intact, despite the whispers still circulating through every drawing room in the city. Ilara's mother insisted on her attendance, believing a public appearance alongside Alaric might quiet some of the more damaging rumors before they grew beyond repair. Alara dressed carefully that evening, choosing a deep blue gown that made her feel steadier than she actually felt inside. She rode to the Winterbourne residence with her parents, the carriage silent apart from the occasional creak of wheels against cobblestone, each of them lost in private thoughts about the evening ahead. The supper itself proved tedious, filled with careful conversation and forced smiles exchanged across a long table, crowded with distant relations and prominent society figures, eager to observe how the betrothed couple behaved toward one another. Alaric sat beside her throughout the meal, attentive in a manner that felt performative rather than genuine, clearly conscious of the many eyes watching their every interaction. "You look lovely tonight," he murmured at one point, refilling her wineglass with practiced charm. "Thank you," Alara replied evenly, though she found it difficult to summon warmth into her voice. After supper concluded, the guests moved into an adjoining drawing room for cards and quiet conversation. Alara found herself seated near a group of older women, discussing fashion and household matters, content to remain largely silent while her mind wandered elsewhere. It was during a brief lull in conversation that she noticed Alaric slip quietly toward a side door leading out into the garden. Curiosity, or perhaps a growing suspicion she could not quite ignore, prompted her to follow at a discreet distance. She reached the garden just in time to see Alaric standing beneath a large oak tree, speaking in hushed tones with a figure she recognized instantly. Vivian Ashcroft stood close beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, their heads bent together in quiet, familiar conversation. Alara remained hidden in the shadow of the doorway, her heart sinking as she watched the scene unfold before her. She could not hear their exact words, but their body language told her everything she needed to know. This was not the behavior of old friends maintaining innocent affection. This was something deeper, something that had clearly continued long after the engagement ball's public embarrassment. She stepped back quietly, before either of them noticed her presence, returning to the drawing room with her thoughts racing, her resolve hardening with each passing second. By the time Alaric returned inside several minutes later, offering some flimsy excuse about needing fresh air, Alara had already reached a decision that had been building steadily within her for days. She said nothing that evening, choosing instead to endure the remainder of the gathering with careful composure, though inside she felt a strange sense of clarity settling over her, replacing the confusion and hurt that had plagued her since the ball. The following morning, she requested a private conversation with her father, before he departed for his usual business appointments. "Father," she began, once they were seated together in his study, "I have decided that I cannot proceed with this engagement." Her father set down the papers he had been reviewing, studying her carefully. "Alara, we discussed this matter already. I understand your frustrations, but breaking this alliance now would carry serious consequences for our family." "I understand the consequences, Father. I have considered them carefully, but I witnessed something last night at the Winterbourne supper that has made my decision unshakable." She proceeded to describe what she had seen in the garden, watching her father's expression shift from skepticism to genuine concern as she spoke. "You are certain of what you saw?" "Completely certain, Father. Alaric's affections remain firmly with Lady Ashcroft, regardless of whatever assurances his family has offered you. I cannot build a marriage upon such an unstable foundation, no matter how valuable the alliance might prove for our family's interests." Her father was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming thoughtfully against his desk. "This will not be received well, Alara. Breaking a betrothal, particularly after a public announcement, invites significant scandal. I am aware, Father, but I would rather endure temporary scandal than a lifetime bound to a man who does not truly wish to be mine." Something in her voice must have convinced him of her genuine resolve, because his expression softened slightly, resignation replacing his earlier reluctance. "Very well. I will speak with Duke Sinclair's father this afternoon and inform him of our decision. I imagine it will not be a pleasant conversation." "Thank you, Father," Alara said quietly, relief and apprehension mingling within her in equal measure. "I know this is not the outcome you hoped for." "Your happiness matters more to me than any alliance, Alara, regardless of how it may sometimes appear," her father replied, his voice carrying unexpected warmth. "I simply wish to ensure you had considered every angle before making such a significant decision." News of the broken engagement spread through society with remarkable speed, exactly as Alara had anticipated. Within days, Every drawing room buzzed with fresh speculation, some sympathizing with her position once details of Alaric's continued involvement with Vivian became known, others criticizing her for embarrassing both families through such a public reversal. Alaric himself called upon her once more, clearly agitated by the sudden shift in circumstances. Alara received him in the drawing room, though this time she felt none of the earlier uncertainty that had colored their previous conversations. "Alara, surely we can discuss this further," he said, his voice tinged with something between frustration and genuine alarm. "Breaking the engagement now, after everything already arranged, will damage both our families considerably." "I did what was necessary, Alaric," she replied calmly. "I saw you with Vivian in the garden at the Winterbourne supper. I cannot continue pretending our engagement holds any true foundation when your heart clearly remains elsewhere." His expression flickered with something like guilt, though he quickly composed himself. "That was merely old friendship, nothing more. You are overreacting to a simple conversation. Perhaps if it had been the first such instance, I might believe you," Alara said. "But I witnessed similar behavior at our engagement ball, and now again at the Winterbourne supper. I am not overreacting, Alaric. I am simply refusing to ignore what stands plainly before me." He had no adequate response to offer, and after several more minutes of increasingly strained conversation, he departed with visible frustration, though Alara felt only relief as the door closed behind him. She had made her decision, and despite the scandal it would undoubtedly generate, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. Word of the situation eventually reached Duke Riston Blackwood, as Alara learned during their next encounter, at a small literary gathering hosted by a mutual acquaintance. He approached her almost immediately upon her arrival, his expression carefully composed, though something in his eyes suggested genuine relief at the news. "Lady Alara," he said, offering a respectful bow. "I understand congratulations, or perhaps commiserations, are in order, depending on one's perspective." "Relief, mostly," Alara admitted with a small, tired smile, "though I imagine society views the situation rather differently. Society often values convenient arrangements over genuine happiness," Ristan observed. "I suspect you already understood the risk involved in choosing otherwise." "I did," she confirmed, "though I found myself unable to continue pretending contentment with a match built on such unstable ground." Ristan studied her for a long moment, something warm and genuine shining in his gaze that she had not seen from him before. "I admire your courage, Lady Alara. It takes considerable strength to prioritize honesty over convenient expectation, particularly when society offers so little support for such choices. Thank you, Your Grace. Your words mean more than you likely realize, given how few people have offered similar sentiments since the news became known." They spoke for a while longer, their conversation flowing easily despite the underlying tension surrounding recent events. Alara found herself grateful, once again, for his steady presence, so markedly different from the anxious, defensive reactions she had encountered from most others regarding her decision. As the gathering drew toward its conclusion, Ristan walked with her toward the entrance where her carriage waited. "May I ask you something, Lady Alara?" he said, pausing near the doorway. "Of course. Now that circumstances have changed so significantly, might I have your permission to call upon you properly? Not as mere acquaintances crossing paths at social gatherings, but with genuine intention toward furthering our connection." Alara felt her pulse quicken at the directness of his request, though she found herself pleased rather than alarmed by his honesty. "I would welcome that, Your Grace," she replied, offering a genuine smile. "Though I confess, given recent events, I am somewhat wary of rushing into new arrangements too quickly." "I understand completely," Ristan assured her. "I have no wish to pressure you into anything beyond what feels comfortable. I simply wish to make my intentions clear, rather than leaving you uncertain of where matters stand between us." "Your honesty is appreciated, as always," Alara said, genuinely touched by his consideration. "I would welcome the opportunity to know you better, without the pressure of expectation clouding our acquaintance." He nodded, satisfied with her response, and escorted her to her waiting carriage, offering his hand to help her step inside. "I shall call upon you within the week, if that suits your schedule." "It suits me perfectly, Your Grace." As the carriage pulled away, Alara settled back against the cushioned seat, her thoughts considerably lighter than they had been in weeks. The scandal surrounding her broken engagement would undoubtedly continue circulating through society for some time yet, and she knew difficult conversations still awaited her with various family members and acquaintances, eager to offer unsolicited opinions on her decision. Yet despite all of that, she felt an unfamiliar sense of hope beginning to take root within her, cautious but genuine, centered around the quiet, steady presence of a man who had shown her, time and again, that honesty and respect could exist within courtship, rather than the careless disregard she had endured throughout her engagement to Alaric. Over the following days, Elara found herself the subject of considerable gossip throughout the city, though she discovered, somewhat to her surprise, that she cared far less about such talk than she might have expected. Her closest friends, including Margaret, rallied around her with genuine support, while more distant acquaintances offered varying degrees of judgment depending on their personal alliances with either her family or Alaric's. Her father, despite his initial reservations, proved surprisingly supportive throughout the aftermath, defending her decision whenever conversations turned critical, reminding anyone who questioned the wisdom of breaking such an advantageous alliance that his daughter's genuine happiness mattered more to him than any practical arrangement. Her mother, though initially more hesitant, gradually came around to similar sentiments, particularly after learning the full details of what Elara had witnessed at the Winterbourne supper. Alaric, for his part, made no further attempts to reconcile the broken engagement, seemingly resigned to the consequences of his own actions. Elara heard, through various channels, that his continued association with Vivian Ashcroft had become considerably more open following the engagement's dissolution, confirming everything she had already suspected about where his true affections had rested throughout their brief betrothal. True to his word, Duke Riston Blackwood called upon her exactly 1 week later, arriving punctually with a small bouquet of flowers that Elara found genuinely touching in its simplicity, so different from the elaborate, performative gestures she had grown accustomed to from Alaric. Their conversation that afternoon flowed easily, covering topics ranging from literature to estate management to childhood memories, each revealing small pieces of themselves to the other, with growing comfort and mutual interest. As their acquaintance continued to develop over subsequent weeks, Elara found herself increasingly drawn toward Ristan's steady, genuine presence, appreciating the way he listened attentively to her thoughts and opinions, never dismissing her perspective in favor of his own, as Alaric had so often done throughout their engagement. Their growing connection felt entirely different from anything she had previously experienced, built gradually through mutual respect and genuine interest rather than family obligation or practical necessity. Yet even as her relationship with Ristan continued to deepen, Elara remained acutely aware that society's scrutiny had not fully faded, and that further challenges likely awaited her as their courtship became more publicly known. She found herself wondering, during quiet moments alone, whether Ristan's growing affection for her might eventually face similar tests to those that had ultimately exposed the hollow foundation of her engagement to Alaric, or whether the genuine connection building steadily between them possessed the strength to weather whatever obstacles society might yet place before them. The city's appetite for scandal did not fade as quickly as Elara had hoped. Weeks after the broken engagement, she still found herself the subject of pointed conversation whenever she entered a room, though the nature of the whispers had shifted considerably since word spread of Duke Blackwood's growing attention toward her. What had once been sympathy, mixed with judgment, now carried an edge of fascination, as though society could not decide whether to admire her courage or condemn her for moving so quickly toward another suitor. Her mother addressed this shift directly one afternoon, while they sat together in the small parlor overlooking the garden. "People are talking, Elara, about Duke Blackwood's visits." "I am aware, Mother," Elara replied, setting aside her needlework. "I did not realize courtship required society's unanimous approval before proceeding." "It does not require approval," her mother said carefully, "though it certainly benefits from avoiding unnecessary suspicion. Some believe you ended your engagement to Duke Sinclair specifically to pursue Duke Blackwood, rather than because of his behavior with Lady Ashcroft." Elara felt a flash of frustration at the accusation, unfair as it was. "That is simply untrue. I had barely spoken with Ristan before the ball. My decision to end things with Alaric had nothing to do with him." "I believe you, Elara. But belief and public perception are not always the same thing." Her mother studied her carefully. "You must be prepared for such accusations to continue, particularly if your connection with Duke Blackwood grows more serious." "I understand, Mother, though I confess, I find myself less concerned with public perception than I once was. Recent events have taught me that pursuing genuine happiness matters more than avoiding gossip. Her mother's expression softened slightly at this, something like quiet pride flickering behind her eyes. Your father mentioned similar sentiments recently. Perhaps this entire ordeal has taught our family more than we anticipated. Despite these reassurances, Ilara found the persistent scrutiny wearing on her more than she cared to admit. She began declining invitations to larger gatherings, preferring instead smaller, more private visits with close friends and family, where conversation felt genuine rather than performative. Rystan, sensing her growing weariness with public attention, suggested during one visit that they might spend an afternoon away from the city entirely, visiting his family's estate a short distance beyond the outskirts. The gardens there are quite beautiful this time of year, he explained, and considerably more private than anything the city offers. I thought you might appreciate a respite from prying eyes. Ilara agreed readily, grateful for the suggestion, and arrangements were made for a chaperoned visit the following week. The estate, when they arrived, proved even lovelier than Rystan had described. Sprawling gardens stretching toward distant woodland, a peaceful stream winding through manicured lawns, dotted with ancient oak trees that had clearly stood for generations. This is beautiful, Rystan, Ilara said, walking beside him along a stone path bordering the garden's central fountain, her chaperone maintaining a respectful distance behind them. I can understand why you find such peace here. My mother designed much of this garden herself, Rystan explained, something wistful entering his voice. She passed when I was young, but I always feel closer to her memory when I walk these paths. Ilara glanced at him with genuine sympathy. I am sorry for your loss, Rystan. Losing a parent so young must have been terribly difficult. It was, he admitted quietly. My father struggled considerably afterward, and our relationship grew strained in the years that followed. I inherited the title far earlier than expected, at an age when I was scarcely prepared for such responsibility. That explains, perhaps, why you approach matters with such careful deliberation, Ilara observed. You learned early that circumstances can shift without warning. Perhaps, Rystan agreed, offering a small, thoughtful smile. Though I sometimes wonder whether that same caution has cost me opportunities I should have pursued more boldly. Such as? He paused near the fountain, turning to face her directly, something earnest and unguarded in his expression that she had not seen from him before, such as recognizing genuine connection when it presents itself, rather than allowing excessive caution to delay acknowledgement of what I already know to be true. Ilara's breath caught slightly at the intensity behind his words, understanding clearly what he meant to convey, even without explicit statement. And what is it you believe to be true, Rystan? That my regard for you has grown considerably beyond simple friendship these past weeks, Ilara. I find myself thinking of you constantly, eager for each opportunity to further our acquaintance, genuinely invested in your happiness and well-being in a manner I have not experienced with anyone previously. Ilara felt warmth spreading through her chest at his admission, genuine and unforced, so different from anything Alaric had ever expressed toward her. I feel similarly, Rystan, though given recent circumstances, I confess some hesitation in fully embracing such feelings so quickly. I understand your hesitation completely, Rystan assured her gently. I do not wish to rush you into anything before you feel genuinely ready. I simply wished you to understand exactly where my heart currently stands, without pretense or careful evasion. Thank you for your honesty, Ilara said softly. It means more to me than you likely realize, particularly given how little honesty I encountered throughout my previous engagement. They continued their walk through the gardens, conversation flowing comfortably between lighter topics, interspersed with moments of genuine vulnerability, each revealing further pieces of themselves as their afternoon together progressed. By the time they returned to the main house for refreshments, Ilara felt considerably more settled than she had in weeks, the persistent anxiety surrounding society's scrutiny fading somewhat beneath the genuine warmth of Rystan's company. However, their peaceful respite proved short-lived. Upon returning to the city that evening, Ilara discovered a note waiting for her from Margaret, urgent in tone, requesting an immediate visit regarding matters of considerable importance. Concerned, Ilara arranged to see her friend the following morning, finding Margaret unusually agitated when she arrived. Ilara, I must tell you something, though I fear it will cause you considerable distress, Margaret began, ushering her quickly into the privacy of her sitting room. What is it, Margaret? You look terribly worried. Margaret hesitated, clearly struggling with how best to proceed. I overheard a conversation yesterday between my sister and one of her acquaintances regarding Lady Ashcroft. It seems she has been telling certain circles that your engagement to Duke Sinclair ended not because of his behavior toward her, but because you had already grown enamored with Duke Blackwood and manufactured the entire scandal to justify breaking things off in his favor. Alara felt anger flare within her at such a blatant distortion of events. That is completely false, Margaret. You know exactly what I witnessed at the Winterbourne supper. I believe you completely, Alara. But Vivian's account is spreading through certain circles, and I fear it may reach Duke Blackwood's connections eventually, potentially complicating your growing relationship with him. Alara's stomach tightened at this possibility. Do you believe Ristan would give credence to such rumors? I do not know him well enough to say for certain, Margaret admitted. Though given how genuinely he seems to care for you, I would hope he possesses enough judgment to recognize baseless gossip when he encounters it. Despite Margaret's reassurance, Alara left their meeting considerably more anxious than she had arrived, worried that Vivian's manipulative version of events might somehow poison her budding relationship with Ristan before it had fully taken root. She debated whether to address the matter directly with him, ultimately deciding that honesty, once again, represented her best course of action. She arranged for him to call upon her that same afternoon, and once they were alone in the drawing room, she explained everything Margaret had shared, watching his expression carefully throughout her account for any sign of doubt or hesitation. This does not surprise me, unfortunately, Ristan said once she finished, his expression hardening slightly. Lady Ashcroft has never struck me as particularly concerned with truth when a more convenient narrative serves her purposes better. You do not believe her account, then? Alara, I witnessed your composure at the ball myself, before you and I had exchanged more than a few words. I have no doubt whatsoever regarding the true sequence of events, nor any question about the genuine reasons behind your decision to end things with Duke Sinclair. Vivian's attempts to rewrite history do not concern me in the slightest. Relief flooded through Alara at his steady reassurance, grateful once again for his unwavering trust in her honesty. Thank you, Ristan. I worried such rumors might complicate matters between us. Nothing manufactured by Lady Ashcroft's imagination could complicate what I know to be genuinely true between us. Alara, Ristan replied firmly. I would ask, however, that you allow me to address the matter directly, should it continue spreading further. I have no wish for such falsehoods to damage your reputation any further than it has already suffered from recent events. I would appreciate that, Ristan, though I hope it does not become necessary. Unfortunately, the rumor did continue circulating over subsequent days, eventually reaching enough prominent circles that Ristan felt compelled to address it publicly during a social gathering hosted by mutual acquaintances. When conversation turned toward the topic, subtly probing for his reaction, he addressed the matter with characteristic directness. I have heard the suggestion that Lady Alara manufactured circumstances to justify ending her engagement in favor of pursuing connection with myself, he stated calmly to the small gathering that had assembled. I can assure everyone present that such claims are entirely without merit. My acquaintance with Lady Alara began only after her engagement had already fractured, due to Duke Sinclair's own actions I witnessed corroborated by multiple sources beyond Lady Alara's own account. His firm public defense effectively silenced much of the remaining speculation, though Alara knew certain circles, particularly those loyal to Vivian, would likely continue harboring skepticism regardless of Ristan's clear statement. Still, his willingness to publicly defend her reputation, without hesitation or careful qualification, meant more to her than she could adequately express. Their relationship continued deepening over subsequent weeks, Ristan calling upon her regularly, their conversations growing increasingly personal and unguarded as trust between them solidified further. Alara found herself genuinely happy for the first time in longer than she cared to admit, the lingering shadow of her broken engagement gradually fading beneath the steady warmth of Ristan's genuine affection and unwavering support. Yet even as their connection strengthened, Alara remained aware that Alaric and Vivian's continued presence within society meant further complications likely awaited them both, obstacles that would test the genuine foundation they had worked so carefully to build together. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a footman in unfamiliar livery, sealed with wax bearing the crest of Lord Pembroke, a prominent figure within society, known for hosting some of the most extravagant gatherings of the season. Alara opened it curiously, scanning the elegant script, only to feel her stomach drop when she reached the guest list attached, confirming that both Duke Sinclair and Lady Ashcroft had also been invited to the same masquerade ball scheduled for the following fortnight. She brought the invitation to Ristan during his next visit, uncertain whether attending together would prove wise, given the inevitable tension such an encounter would create. "I am uncertain how to proceed," she admitted, handing him the invitation. "Attending feels like inviting further complications, yet declining might suggest weakness, as though I remain afraid to face them." Ristan studied the invitation carefully before returning it to her. "I believe declining would only encourage further speculation, Alara. Attending together, with confidence and composure, sends a far stronger message than avoidance ever could." "You believe we should attend, then?" "I believe you should attend if you feel genuinely prepared to do so, without allowing fear of confrontation to dictate your choices. I will accompany you regardless of your decision, though the choice itself must remain entirely yours." Alara considered his words carefully, recognizing the wisdom behind them. She had spent too many months already allowing others' actions to dictate her own behavior, retreating into isolation whenever society's scrutiny grew uncomfortable. Perhaps it was time to reclaim some measure of control over her own narrative, rather than continuing to hide from circumstances she had done nothing wrong to create. "I will attend," she decided finally, "together with you, if you are willing." "I would be honored," Ristan replied, genuine warmth evident in his expression. The days leading up to the masquerade passed in a blur of preparation, Alara selecting a gown of deep emerald silk paired with an elegant silver mask that covered the upper portion of her face, while leaving her identity easily recognizable to anyone familiar with her features. On the evening of the ball, Ristan arrived to escort her personally, looking distinguished in formal attire, complemented by a dark mask that lent him an air of mystery beyond his already imposing presence. "You look absolutely stunning, Alara," he said, as she descended the staircase to meet him, genuine admiration evident in his voice. "Thank you, Ristan. You look rather dashing yourself." They arrived at Lord Pembroke's grand residence to find the ballroom already filled with masked guests, candlelight glimmering off elaborate costumes and jeweled masks, music weaving through the crowded space, with an energy that felt simultaneously festive and charged with underlying tension. Alara recognized several acquaintances despite their masks, their familiar mannerisms, and voices giving away identities that costume alone could not fully conceal. They had not been present for more than half an hour when Alara spotted Alaric across the room, his mask failing to disguise his distinctive bearing. Vivian, standing close beside him in a striking crimson gown. Their eyes met briefly across the crowded floor before Alaric deliberately looked away. Though Vivian's gaze lingered longer, something calculating flickering behind her mask. "They have noticed us," Alara murmured to Ristan, who followed her gaze toward the couple in question. "I imagine everyone in this room has noticed us by now, given recent gossip," Ristan replied calmly. "Shall we simply enjoy the evening regardless, and allow their presence to remain merely incidental to our own experience?" Alara appreciated his steady composure, drawing strength from it as they moved further into the crowd, engaging in conversation with various acquaintances, dancing together twice during the evening, with an ease that felt entirely natural compared to the stilted formality she had experienced dancing with Alaric at their engagement ball months earlier. It was during a brief respite from dancing, as Alara stood near the refreshment table catching her breath, that Vivian approached her directly, her expression carefully arranged into something resembling polite civility, though Alara detected the underlying edge beneath her tone immediately. "Lady Alara," Vivian said, her voice carrying just enough volume to attract the attention of nearby guests. "How lovely to see you here, and with Duke Blackwood no less. Society does move quickly, does it not?" "Society moves at whatever pace circumstances dictate, Lady Ashcroft," Alara replied evenly, refusing to allow the implied insult to rattle her composure. "Though I imagine you understand that better than most, given your own history of moving quickly between attachments." Vivian's smile faltered slightly at the pointed response, clearly having expected Alara to shrink from confrontation rather than meet it directly. "I simply meant to observe how remarkably resilient you have proven, moving so swiftly from one duke to another. I appreciate your concern for my resilience, Lady Ashcroft, though I assure you, it is entirely unnecessary. My decisions have been guided by honesty and genuine affection, rather than the careful manipulation of circumstances that others might employ to achieve their desired outcomes. The pointed implication landed clearly, and Vivian's expression tightened further, though she maintained her composure with visible effort. I am uncertain what you mean to suggest, Lady Alara. I believe you understand precisely what I mean, Lady Ashcroft. Though I have no wish to create further scenes this evening, shall we simply agree to enjoy the remainder of the ball, without further discussion of matters best left in the past? Vivian studied her for a long moment, something calculating shifting behind her expression, before she finally offered a tight, insincere smile. Of course, Lady Alara. I wish you continued happiness with Duke Blackwood. With that, she turned and retreated back into the crowd, leaving Alara feeling surprisingly steady despite the tense exchange. Riston, who had witnessed the latter portion of their conversation from a short distance, approached once Vivian departed, his expression carrying quiet admiration. That was masterfully handled, Alara. I do not believe I have ever seen Lady Ashcroft rendered so thoroughly speechless. I grew tired of allowing her narrative to go unchallenged, Alara admitted, feeling a genuine sense of satisfaction at having finally addressed the woman directly, rather than continuing to endure her manipulations from a distance. It felt long overdue. The remainder of the evening passed considerably more pleasantly, Alara feeling lighter and more confident than she had throughout the earlier portion of the ball. The confrontation with Vivian, somehow releasing tension she had not fully realized she had been carrying since the entire scandal first began. She and Riston continued dancing and conversing with various guests, their genuine connection evident to anyone observing them closely, drawing admiring glances from several onlookers who had clearly grown weary of the earlier gossip surrounding their courtship. Near the end of the evening, as guests began gradually departing and the orchestra prepared for one final dance, Alaric approached Alara unexpectedly, finding her momentarily alone, while Riston had stepped away briefly to retrieve refreshments. Alara, he said quietly, his mask now removed, revealing an expression she had not seen from him since before their broken engagement, something resembling genuine regret. I wish to speak with you, if you would permit it. Alara studied him carefully, uncertain what he hoped to accomplish through such conversation. What is it you wish to discuss, Alaric? I have watched you tonight, with Duke Blackwood, he said slowly. You seem genuinely happy, Alara. Happier than I ever managed to make you feel throughout our engagement, if I am honest with myself. You are only now recognizing that, Alaric? He winced slightly at the pointed observation, though he did not attempt to argue against it. I suppose I have had considerable time to reflect since our engagement ended. I behaved poorly, Alara, both at the ball and throughout our courtship generally. I allowed my attachment to Vivian to overshadow the respect and consideration you deserved as my intended bride. I appreciate your acknowledgement, Alaric, though I confess it arrives rather late to change anything meaningful between us now. I do not seek to change anything between us, he assured her quickly. I simply wished you to know that I recognize my own failures in how I treated you, and that I genuinely wish you happiness moving forward, whatever form that happiness ultimately takes. Alara felt something soften slightly within her at his unexpected sincerity, though the earlier hurt remained too fresh to fully forgive without reservation. Thank you for saying so, Alaric. I hope you find genuine happiness as well, whatever path you choose to pursue with Lady Ashcroft or otherwise. He nodded, seemingly satisfied with this exchange, and excused himself just as Riston returned with 2 glasses of refreshment. Was that Duke Sinclair I saw departing? Riston asked, handing her one of the glasses. It was, Alara confirmed. He offered something resembling a genuine apology, admitting his failures throughout our engagement. That is unexpected, Riston observed, studying her expression carefully. How do you feel about such an admission? Surprisingly settled, actually, Alara replied honestly. I do not believe I harbor any lingering resentment toward him any longer. Perhaps this evening has finally allowed me to release whatever remained of that earlier hurt. Riston smiled warmly at this, genuine relief evident in his expression. I am glad to hear it, Alara. You deserve to move forward unburdened by past disappointments. As the masquerade drew to its conclusion, and guests began departing into the cool night air. Ilara felt a profound sense of resolution settling over her. The confrontation with Vivian, and unexpected reconciliation with Alaric, somehow combining to release tensions she had carried since the very beginning of this entire ordeal. Walking beside Ristan toward their waiting carriage, she felt genuinely hopeful about the future stretching before them, no longer burdened by lingering questions about her past choices, or anxiety about society's continued scrutiny. "Thank you for encouraging me to attend tonight," she said, as they settled into the carriage for the journey home. "I believe I needed this evening more than I initially realized." "I am glad it proved beneficial," Ristan replied, taking her hand gently in his own. "Though I suspect this evening represents merely the beginning of considerably more happiness awaiting us both, should we continue building upon the foundation we have established together." Ilara smiled, genuine warmth spreading through her chest at his words, allowing herself, for the first time in months, to imagine a future filled with the kind of authentic partnership she had once feared might remain forever beyond her reach. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm over the following weeks. Ristan called upon Ilara several times each week, their courtship progressing steadily, under the watchful but increasingly approving eyes of both families. Ilara's parents, having witnessed the genuine warmth between the couple, grew visibly fond of Ristan, welcoming him into their home with a familiarity that had never quite developed during her engagement to Alaric. Yet Ilara noticed, during one particular visit, a subtle shift in Ristan's demeanor that concerned her. He arrived later than usual, his expression distracted, his responses to her questions shorter than his customary warmth typically allowed. "Is something troubling you, Ristan?" she asked finally, unable to ignore the tension radiating from him throughout their afternoon together. He hesitated, clearly weighing how much to share. "My father has written to me," he admitted eventually. "He wishes to discuss matters regarding the estate, and regarding my future marriage prospects." Ilara felt a flicker of unease at his careful phrasing. What kind of matters exactly? "My father has long held expectations regarding an alliance with the Ashford family," Ristan explained slowly. "Lord Ashford's daughter, Lady Cecilia, has been considered a suitable match for me since we were children, much as your own betrothal to Duke Sinclair was arranged years ago." Ilara's stomach tightened at this revelation, unwelcome memories of her own arranged engagement surfacing immediately. "You never mentioned this before, Ristan." "Because it has never mattered to me, Ilara. I have made clear to my father on numerous occasions that I have no intention of marrying Lady Cecilia, regardless of his wishes. Our family's historical connection does not obligate me toward a match I do not genuinely desire." Yet he continues pressing the matter? "He does," Ristan admitted, frustration evident in his voice, "particularly now that word of our courtship has reached him. He believes my attachment to you represents nothing more than a passing infatuation, easily set aside, once I properly consider my responsibilities toward the family name." Ilara felt something cold settle within her chest, uncomfortably familiar echoes of her own recent experience threatening to resurface. "And what do you intend to do, Ristan?" "I intend to tell him precisely what I told him previously," Ristan said firmly, meeting her gaze directly. "That my heart belongs to you, Ilara, and that no arrangement made without my genuine consent will ever supersede that truth." Despite his evident conviction, Ilara could not fully shake the anxiety his revelation had stirred within her. "Ristan, I do not wish to become the cause of further strain between you and your father. I understand better than most the weight of family expectation, and I would not want you sacrificing important relationships on my account. You are not the cause of any strain, Ilara. My father's rigid expectations are the cause. I refuse to allow his outdated notions of suitable alliance to dictate my own happiness, particularly when I have found something far more valuable than any strategic marriage could ever provide." His words offered some comfort, though Ilara remained troubled throughout the remainder of his visit, unable to fully release the worry that his father's opposition might eventually prove more formidable than Ristan currently anticipated. After he departed that evening, she sought out her mother, seeking guidance on how best to navigate this unexpected complication. "Every family carries its own expectations, Ilara," her mother said thoughtfully, once Ilara had explained the situation. "The question is whether Duke Blackwood possesses sufficient conviction to withstand his father's pressure, much as you demonstrated similar conviction in ending your own arranged engagement." "I believe he does, Mother. though I confess uncertainty about how this situation might ultimately unfold. Then perhaps patience, combined with continued faith in his stated intentions, represents your best course forward. You cannot control his father's opinions, Ilara, only your own response to whatever challenges arise from them. Her mother's counsel offered some measure of reassurance, though Ilara remained watchful over subsequent days, monitoring Ristan's demeanor carefully for any sign that his father's pressure might be wearing at his earlier resolve. To her relief, he continued calling upon her regularly, his affection remaining steady and unwavering, despite the underlying tension she knew persisted regarding his family situation. The matter came to a head roughly 2 weeks later, when Ristan arrived unexpectedly one afternoon, his expression grave, requesting a private conversation with considerable urgency. Ilara's chaperone maintained appropriate distance while they spoke quietly near the parlor window. "My father has arrived in the city," Ristan explained without preamble. "He insists on meeting you directly, Ilara, before he will consider abandoning his hopes for the Ashford alliance entirely." Ilara felt her pulse quicken at this news. "He wishes to meet me? For what purpose?" "I believe he intends to assess whether you represent a suitable match in his estimation, or whether he might successfully argue for reconsidering the Ashford arrangement instead." Ristan's jaw tightened with obvious frustration. "I apologize, Ilara. I had hoped to spare you this particular ordeal, though it seems avoiding it entirely has become impossible." "I am not afraid to meet your father, Ristan," Ilara said, though privately she felt considerable apprehension at the prospect. "If proving myself worthy in his estimation is necessary toward securing our future together, I am willing to face that challenge directly." "You should not have to prove anything, Ilara. Your worth is not contingent upon my father's approval." "Perhaps not," she agreed. "But if his approval matters toward preserving your relationship with him, then I am willing to make the effort regardless." Family matters deeply, Ristan, even when circumstances prove difficult. Arrangements were made for the meeting to take place the following week, at a small private luncheon hosted at Ristan's family's city residence. Ilara spent the days beforehand in careful preparation, though she recognized that no amount of preparation could fully guarantee a positive outcome, given the elder Duke Blackwood's evident predisposition against their match. On the appointed day, Ilara arrived at the Blackwood residence, accompanied by her mother, both dressed with careful elegance, appropriate to the significance of the occasion. Ristan greeted them at the entrance, his expression tense despite his evident efforts to project confidence. "My father awaits us in the drawing room," he said, offering his arm to escort Ilara inside. "I must warn you, he can prove quite direct in his questioning." "I appreciate the warning, Ristan. I believe I have grown accustomed to direct questioning, given recent months of scrutiny." The elder Duke Blackwood proved an imposing figure, tall and severe in bearing, his eyes assessing Ilara with obvious scrutiny the moment she entered the room. He offered polite but reserved greetings, before gesturing toward seats arranged around the drawing room, luncheon already prepared and waiting on a nearby table. Conversation throughout the meal remained carefully formal, the elder Duke posing questions about Ilara's family background, her education, her interests and accomplishments. Each inquiry delivered with an undertone suggesting genuine skepticism regarding her suitability. Ilara answered each question honestly and directly, refusing to allow his obvious testing to unsettle her composure. "I understand you recently ended an engagement to Duke Sinclair," the elder Duke observed at one point, his tone carrying deliberate weight. "Rather publicly, if the rumors circulating through society prove accurate." "I ended the engagement because Duke Sinclair's affections remained with another woman throughout our courtship, Your Grace," Ilara replied evenly. "I did not believe continuing toward marriage under such circumstances would serve either of us well, regardless of whatever scandal such a decision might invite." "A bold choice, particularly for a young woman in your position," the elder Duke observed, though something in his expression suggested grudging respect beneath his continued skepticism. "Many would have simply endured such circumstances, rather than risk the consequences of public scandal." "I considered enduring it, Your Grace. Ultimately, I concluded that genuine happiness matters more than avoiding temporary discomfort, regardless of society's expectations." The elder Duke studied her for a long moment, something calculating behind his gaze before he finally spoke again. "And what makes you believe my son represents a wiser choice than Duke Sinclair proved to be?" "I do not claim certainty about the future, Your Grace. I can only speak to what I have observed thus far. Your son has treated me with consistent honesty and genuine respect since we first became acquainted, qualities I found sorely lacking throughout my previous engagement. Whether that foundation proves sufficient for lasting happiness remains to be seen, though I believe it offers considerably better prospects than an arrangement built purely on strategic convenience. Ristan glanced toward his father throughout this exchange, clearly gauging his reaction, though the elder duke's expression remained carefully neutral, revealing little of his true thoughts on the matter. The luncheon concluded shortly afterward, with the elder duke offering only measured, non-committal pleasantries as Alara and her mother prepared to depart. "Thank you for joining us, Lady Alara," he said finally, his tone carrying slightly more warmth than his earlier questioning had suggested. "I shall consider carefully everything discussed today." Once Alara and her mother had departed, Ristan remained behind with his father, anxious to understand his true reaction to the meeting. "What did you think of her, father?" The elder duke was quiet for a long moment, considering his response carefully. "She possesses considerable strength of character, Ristan. More than I expected, given her age and circumstances. Whether that translates into a suitable match for our family's future remains a question I am not yet prepared to answer definitively. I do not require your definitive approval, father, though I would welcome it. I intend to pursue marriage with Alara Whitmore, regardless of your final decision on the matter." His father studied him carefully, something unreadable flickering across his weathered features. "I do not doubt your conviction, Ristan. I simply wish to ensure you have considered every angle before committing yourself so completely to a match that will inevitably invite continued scrutiny, given her recent history." "I have considered every angle, father. My mind remains unchanged." The elder duke said nothing further on the matter that evening, leaving Ristan uncertain whether his father's continued reservations might yet prove an obstacle to their eventual marriage, or whether time and further acquaintance might gradually soften his resistance toward accepting Alara as a genuine part of their family's future. Several days after the tense luncheon with his father, Ristan found himself unexpectedly confronted by Alaric outside a private gentlemen's club, frequented by much of society's male population. He had not anticipated encountering Alaric there, having assumed enough time had passed since the broken engagement for any lingering tension between them to have faded into polite indifference. Instead, Alaric approached him directly, his expression carrying a mixture of wounded pride and barely suppressed frustration. "Blackwood," Alaric said, his tone clipped. "A word, if you would." Ristan paused, studying him carefully. "Of course, Sinclair. What troubles you? I understand your courtship with Lady Alara progresses quite seriously," Alaric said, his jaw tight. "Rather quickly, in fact, for someone who claims to genuinely value her well-being. I fail to see how the pace of our courtship concerns you, given the circumstances under which your own engagement to her ended," Ristan replied evenly, though he felt his own irritation rising at the implied criticism. "It concerns me, because I question your true motivations, Blackwood. Perhaps you saw an opportunity, in her vulnerability, following our broken engagement, and pursued her rather deliberately, knowing full well how such a connection would reflect upon me." Ristan's expression hardened considerably at this accusation. "You believe I manufactured genuine affection toward Lady Alara simply to embarrass you? That is a rather self-centered interpretation of events, Sinclair, particularly given that your own actions were entirely responsible for the collapse of your engagement." "My actions were misunderstood," Alaric insisted, though his voice lacked full conviction behind the claim. "Were they? I recall witnessing your behavior at the engagement ball myself, well before Alara and I had exchanged more than passing conversation. Your attention toward Lady Ashcroft that evening was hardly subtle, nor was it the only instance of such behavior, from what I understand." Ristan's voice remained calm, despite the underlying edge sharpening his words. "You cannot place blame upon me for recognizing genuine worth in a woman you yourself failed to properly value." Alaric's expression flickered with something like genuine anger now, his earlier composure slipping. "You know nothing of what passed between Alara and myself, Blackwood. Our history extends years beyond your recent acquaintance with her. Perhaps that history matters less than you believe, given how thoroughly you squandered it through your own careless behavior," Ristan replied. "I do not seek confrontation with you, Sinclair, though I will not stand idle while you attempt to suggest my genuine regard for Alara stems from some manufactured desire to wound your pride. My affection for her exists entirely independent of whatever history remains between the two of you." Alaric studied him for a long moment, something shifting behind his gaze, anger gradually giving way to something more resembling grudging acknowledgement. "Perhaps you are correct," he admitted finally, his shoulders sagging slightly. "I have spent considerable time attempting to convince myself that circumstances beyond my control led to our engagement's collapse, rather than accepting my own failures in properly valuing what I possessed. Self-reflection, however belated, carries its own value, Sinclair," Ristan offered, his tone softening somewhat now that the confrontational edge had faded from their exchange. "I do not wish to be your enemy in this matter. I simply intend to pursue genuine happiness with Alara, regardless of whatever history exists between the three of us." "I understand," Alaric said quietly. "I suppose I simply needed to voice my frustrations directly, rather than allowing them to fester unspoken. You are not to blame for my own failures, Blackwood. I recognize that clearly now, even if accepting it fully proves difficult." The two men parted ways shortly afterward, tension considerably eased though not entirely dissolved between them. Ristan reflected on the exchange throughout his carriage ride home, uncertain whether Alaric's apparent acceptance represented genuine resolution or merely temporary composure that might yet resurface given future circumstances. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to either man, Vivian Ashcroft had grown increasingly concerned about the shifting dynamics within society regarding her own reputation. Word of Alaric's public admission of failure toward Alara during the masquerade ball had reached her through various channels, and she recognized, with growing unease, that continued association with him might eventually damage her own standing within society, particularly if his family began questioning the wisdom of maintaining their connection. Determined to protect her position by whatever means necessary, Vivian began quietly circulating additional rumors designed to undermine both Alara's reputation and the legitimacy of her budding relationship with Ristan. She suggested, in careful conversations with strategically chosen acquaintances, that Alara had been secretly corresponding with Duke Blackwood well before her engagement to Alaric had ended, implying a level of impropriety that, if believed, could severely damage both Alara's reputation and Ristan's standing within society. These rumors reached Alara through Margaret, who arrived at her home one afternoon, considerably distressed by what she had overheard during a recent social gathering. "Alara, I fear Vivian's schemes have grown considerably more serious," Margaret explained, once they were settled privately in the drawing room. "She now suggests you engaged in secret correspondence with Duke Blackwood while still betrothed to Alaric, implying impropriety that could damage both your reputation and his standing considerably." Alara felt a fresh wave of frustration wash over her at this latest manipulation. "That is entirely fabricated, Margaret. Ristan and I had barely exchanged words before the engagement ball itself. I know that, Alara, and so do most people who genuinely know you. But such rumors, once circulated widely enough, can prove damaging regardless of their factual accuracy, particularly among those less familiar with your genuine character." Alara brought this new development to Ristan's attention during his next visit, watching his expression darken considerably as she explained Vivian's latest fabrication. "This has gone far enough," he said firmly, once she finished. "I will not allow her continued manipulations to damage your reputation any further, Alara." "What do you propose to do, Ristan?" "I intend to speak with Vivian directly, and make clear that further attempts to spread falsehoods regarding either of us will result in consequences she will find considerably less comfortable than simple confrontation. Ristan, I do not wish to provoke further conflict that might only escalate matters," Alara cautioned, though she appreciated his evident determination to protect her. "Sometimes conflict proves necessary to prevent greater harm, Alara. I do not intend to allow her continued schemes to threaten our future together without addressing the matter directly." True to his word, Ristan sought out Vivian the following day, finding her at a small gathering hosted by mutual acquaintances. He approached her directly, his expression carrying an intensity that immediately caught her attention. "Lady Ashcroft," he said, his tone carefully controlled despite the underlying edge evident beneath his words. "I understand you have been circulating certain claims regarding Lady Alara and myself." Vivian's composure flickered momentarily before she recovered it, offering a carefully arranged smile. "I am uncertain what you mean, Your Grace." "I believe you understand precisely what I mean," Ristan replied firmly. Suggestions of secret correspondence between Lady Alara and myself prior to her broken engagement. Implications of impropriety that hold absolutely no basis in truth. I would advise you to cease such fabrications immediately, Lady Ashcroft, before they invite consequences considerably less pleasant than simple confrontation. Are you threatening me, Your Grace? Vivian asked, though her voice carried less confidence than her words suggested. I am informing you of reality, Lady Ashcroft. Continued attempts to damage Lady Alara's reputation through fabricated claims will not go unanswered. I possess considerable influence within society, and I assure you, I am fully prepared to use it in defense of her honor, should you continue these baseless attacks. Vivian studied him for a long moment, clearly recalculating her approach given his evident resolve. I suppose I may have exaggerated certain details in recent conversations, she admitted finally, her tone considerably more subdued. I meant no genuine harm, merely idle speculation among friends. Regardless of your intentions, the harm remains real, Lady Ashcroft. I trust we understand each other clearly now. Perfectly clearly, Your Grace, Vivian replied, though her expression suggested considerable resentment beneath her outward acquiescence. Ristan departed shortly afterward, satisfied that his direct confrontation had achieved its intended effect, though he remained watchful for any sign that Vivian might attempt further schemes, despite his clear warning. When he relayed the exchange to Alara later that evening, she felt genuine relief at his decisive action, grateful once again for his unwavering commitment to protecting her reputation and their future together. Thank you, Ristan, she said sincerely. I do not know how I would have navigated this situation without your support. You would have managed perfectly well on your own, Alara. You have proven that repeatedly throughout recent months. But I am glad to stand beside you regardless, sharing whatever burdens arise as we continue building our future together. Despite this satisfying resolution regarding Vivian's schemes, Alara remained aware that further challenges likely awaited them, particularly given the elder Duke Blackwood's continued reservations regarding their match. Yet she found herself facing such prospects with considerably more confidence than she had possessed months earlier, buoyed by Ristan's unwavering support and her own growing certainty that their genuine connection possessed the strength to withstand whatever obstacles society might yet place before them. Despite Ristan's firm warning, Vivian's wounded pride did not settle quietly for long. Within a fortnight, a new development emerged that threatened to overshadow everything Alara and Ristan had worked so carefully to build together. Lady Cecilia Ashford, the very woman the elder Duke Blackwood had long favored as a suitable match for his son, arrived unexpectedly in the city, accompanied by her mother, and began appearing at the very same social gatherings Alara and Ristan frequented. Alara first encountered her at a musical evening hosted by one of her mother's longtime friends, the elegant young woman immediately drawing attention throughout the room with her striking beauty and practiced charm. Ristan, standing beside Alara when Cecilia entered, stiffened noticeably, his expression carrying obvious discomfort. "That is Lady Cecilia," he murmured quietly to Alara. "I had not expected her to arrive in the city so soon." "Your father's preferred match," Alara observed, watching the young woman move gracefully through the room, greeting various acquaintances with practiced ease. "Precisely," Ristan confirmed, his jaw tightening slightly. "I imagine her arrival is no coincidence, given recent conversations with my father." Cecilia noticed them shortly afterward, making her way directly toward their position, with a confident smile that suggested she harbored no uncertainty about the reception she expected to receive. "Duke Blackwood," she said warmly, extending her hand toward Ristan, who accepted it with polite but reserved courtesy. "It has been far too long since our families last gathered together." "Lady Cecilia," Ristan replied evenly. "I trust your journey to the city proved comfortable." "Quite comfortable, thank you." Her gaze shifted toward Alara, assessing her with careful scrutiny, disguised beneath polite civility. "And this must be Lady Alara Whitmore. I have heard a great deal about you recently." "All good things, I hope," Alara replied, matching her measured tone with equal composure. "Mostly," Cecilia said, her smile carrying just enough ambiguity to suggest otherwise. "Though I confess, society's gossip proves rather unreliable at times." The exchange remained superficially pleasant throughout the evening, though Alara noticed Cecilia positioning herself near Ristan at every opportunity, engaging him in conversation about shared childhood memories and mutual acquaintances that Alara had no context to participate in fully. She recognized the strategy clearly, understanding that Cecilia intended to remind Ristan of their long history together, subtly emphasizing the natural compatibility their families had long assumed would eventually lead toward marriage. Ristan handled the situation with careful diplomacy throughout the evening, engaging politely with Cecilia while ensuring Alara remained included in every conversation, his attention never wavering fully from her despite Cecilia's persistent efforts to monopolize his focus. Yet Alara could not fully shake a growing unease as the evening progressed. Watching how easily Cecilia moved within the same social circles Ristan had inhabited his entire life, wondering whether his father's continued preference for such a match might eventually prove more persuasive than she currently feared. This unease only deepened over subsequent weeks as Cecilia's presence within society grew increasingly persistent. She appeared at nearly every gathering Alara and Ristan attended, always finding some pretext to engage him directly, always positioning herself as the natural, familiar alternative to Alara's more recent and scandal-tinged presence within his life. The elder Duke Blackwood, meanwhile, began hosting several gatherings, specifically designed to bring Ristan and Cecilia into closer proximity, invitations that proved difficult for Ristan to decline without causing significant familial tension. Alara found herself growing increasingly anxious during this period, uncertain whether Ristan's continued attendance at these gatherings, however reluctant, might eventually soften his resolve regarding his father's preferred match. She raised her concerns during a private conversation one afternoon, unable to fully mask the uncertainty creeping into her voice. "Ristan, I must ask you something directly," she said, once they were settled together in her family's drawing room. "Do you believe your father's continued efforts to encourage a match with Lady Cecilia might eventually succeed in changing your mind?" Ristan looked genuinely startled by the question, setting aside his teacup to focus entirely on her. "Alara, is that truly a concern for you?" "I would be lying if I claimed otherwise," she admitted honestly. "I watch you attend gathering after gathering alongside her, your father clearly orchestrating every opportunity for proximity between you both. I cannot help but wonder whether such persistent pressure might eventually wear down even the strongest resolve." "My resolve regarding you has not wavered in the slightest, Alara," Ristan said firmly, reaching for her hand across the small distance between them. "I attend these gatherings out of respect for my father, not because I harbor any genuine interest in reconsidering Lady Cecilia as a potential match. She is perfectly pleasant, but I feel nothing toward her beyond the familiarity of childhood acquaintance, nothing resembling the genuine connection I share with you." Alara felt relief flooding through her at his sincere reassurance, though the underlying anxiety did not fully dissipate. "I trust you, Ristan. I simply worry about the pressure you face from your father, and whether continuing to resist his wishes might eventually strain your relationship beyond repair." "Some strain may prove unavoidable, Alara, but I would rather endure temporary tension with my father than sacrifice genuine happiness for the sake of preserving an arrangement neither of us genuinely desires." His expression grew more serious. "I intend to speak with him directly, and make absolutely clear that my decision regarding marriage remains final, regardless of whatever continued efforts he makes toward encouraging an alternative." True to his word, Ristan sought out his father the following week, finding him at the family's country estate, where he had retreated, following several weeks in the city. Their conversation proved considerably more heated than previous discussions on the matter, the elder Duke initially resistant to accepting his son's continued insistence that Alara represented his final choice regarding marriage. "You are being unnecessarily stubborn, Ristan," his father argued, pacing the length of his study while Ristan remained seated, watching him carefully. "Lady Cecilia represents everything our family has valued for generations. Compatible background, established connections, a reputation entirely free from scandal. Lady Alara, however genuinely admirable her character, carries the burden of a very public broken engagement that will continue following you both, throughout society, for years to come. I do not care about avoiding scandal at the expense of genuine happiness, father," Ristan replied firmly. "You raised me to value honesty and integrity above convenient appearance. Lady Alara embodies exactly those values. Values I find sorely lacking in an arrangement built purely on strategic advantage." His father paused his pacing, studying Ristan carefully for a long moment. I simply wish to ensure you have considered every consequence before committing yourself so completely, Ristan. Marriage is not merely a matter of personal happiness. It carries implications for our family's standing, our connections, our legacy moving forward. I have considered every consequence, Father, repeatedly, over many months now. My decision remains unchanged. I intend to marry Alara Whitmore, with or without your blessing, though I would genuinely prefer to have your support in this matter. The elder Duke was quiet for a long moment, something shifting behind his weathered expression as he studied his son's evident resolve. You truly love her then, not merely admire her character, but genuinely love her. With my entire heart, Father, Ristan confirmed without hesitation, more deeply than I believed myself capable of feeling toward anyone. His father sighed heavily, sinking into the chair behind his desk, something resembling resignation finally settling over his features. Very well, Ristan. I will cease my efforts to encourage the Ashford alliance. I cannot claim to fully understand your choice, given the complications her recent history presents, but I recognize when further argument proves futile. Relief flooded through Ristan at this unexpected concession. Thank you, Father. This means more to me than you likely realize. I only ask one thing in return, his father continued, his expression growing more serious. Ensure that your choice proves worthy of the sacrifice you are making in defying my wishes. I want genuine happiness for you, Ristan, whatever form that ultimately takes. Do not disappoint me by discovering, years from now, that your certainty today proved misplaced. I will not disappoint you, Father, Ristan promised solemnly. I am certain of this choice in a manner I have never felt certain about anything else in my life. When Ristan relayed this conversation to Alara during his next visit, she felt profound relief and gratitude wash over her, understanding fully the significance of what he had risked in defying his father's wishes so directly. Ristan, I do not know how to properly thank you for standing so firmly on my behalf, she said, genuine emotion evident in her voice. You need not thank me, Alara. I simply spoke the truth, a truth I have known with growing certainty since the very evening we first spoke on that terrace. My father's blessing matters, certainly, but it was never going to change my ultimate decision regarding our future together. With his father's reluctant acceptance secured, and Vivian's schemes largely neutralized following Ristan's direct confrontation, Alara felt, for the first time since her broken engagement began this entire journey, that the path toward genuine happiness with Ristan finally stood clear before them, free from the significant obstacles that had threatened their connection throughout recent months. With his father's blessing secured and Vivian's schemes largely dismantled, Ristan began quietly planning how best to formally express his intentions toward Alara, wishing to create a moment that reflected the genuine depth of feeling that had grown steadily between them since that first fateful conversation on the terrace months earlier. He confided his plans to Alara's father during a private meeting, seeking permission to formally court his daughter toward marriage, a conversation that proved considerably warmer than the tense discussions surrounding her previous engagement. I am pleased to grant my blessing, Duke Blackwood, her father said, shaking his hand firmly once their conversation concluded. I have watched my daughter grow considerably happier since your acquaintance began. That happiness matters more to me than any strategic consideration. With this formal blessing secured, Ristan turned his attention toward planning the perfect moment for his proposal, wanting something that honored the genuine journey they had traveled together, rather than a hollow performance designed merely for society's approval. He settled eventually on the very garden at his family's estate, where they had first exchanged genuine confessions of growing affection, believing the location carried appropriate significance for such an important moment. He arranged for Alara to visit the estate once more, under the pretense of a simple afternoon gathering, though he had carefully orchestrated every detail to ensure their eventual privacy within the garden itself. When she arrived, dressed in a soft yellow gown that caught the afternoon sunlight beautifully, Ristan felt his heart racing with an intensity he had not anticipated, despite his careful preparation. The gardens look particularly lovely today, Alara observed, as they walked together along the familiar stone path, her chaperone maintaining respectful distance, as had become customary throughout their courtship. I thought you might appreciate returning here, Ristan said, guiding her toward the fountain where they had first spoken so openly about their growing feelings for one another. This place holds particular significance for me, given everything that has transpired between us since our first visit. Elara smiled warmly, memory clearly surfacing as she recognized their surroundings. I remember this fountain well. You told me of your mother that day, and confessed feelings you had not yet fully acknowledged even to yourself. I did, Ristan confirmed, his voice growing slightly unsteady with nervousness he could not fully disguise. Elara, I brought you here today because I wish to build upon that earlier confession, to formalize everything that has grown between us since that conversation began. He knelt slowly before her, producing a small velvet box from his coat pocket, watching her expression shift from curiosity to dawning realization as understanding of his intentions became clear. Elara Whitmore, from the very moment I witnessed your composure, that terrible evening at your engagement ball, I recognized something extraordinary within you, a strength and grace that I could not look away from, even before I fully understood what that recognition meant. Every conversation since has only deepened my certainty that you represent everything I have ever hoped to find in a partner for life. Tears gathered in Elara's eyes as she listened, overwhelmed by the sincerity evident in every word he spoke. Ristan, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. I have spoken with your father, secured his blessing, and faced my own father's initial resistance, all because I remain absolutely certain that my future happiness rests entirely with you. Ristan continued, opening the small box to reveal a delicate ring. Its design simple, yet elegant, clearly chosen with careful consideration, rather than mere ostentatious display. Elara, will you honor me by becoming my wife, not through arrangement or obligation, but through genuine choice, freely given, exactly as our connection has grown between us? Elara felt overwhelming joy flooding through her chest, dissolving any remaining traces of the anxiety and uncertainty that had plagued her throughout recent months. Yes, Ristan, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, I will marry you, gladly and completely, choosing you freely, exactly as you have chosen me. Ristan rose immediately, slipping the ring onto her finger, before drawing her into a warm embrace, both of them overwhelmed by the significance of this moment they had worked so diligently to reach together. Her chaperone, witnessing the exchange from a respectful distance, offered quiet congratulations, before discreetly allowing them a few more private moments together, before propriety demanded their return toward the main house. I can scarcely believe we have reached this moment, Elara admitted, still nestled comfortably within his embrace. After everything that transpired since that terrible ball, I never imagined I would find myself here, genuinely happy, genuinely chosen, in a manner I once feared might remain forever beyond my reach. You deserve nothing less than genuine happiness, Elara, Ristan replied softly, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. I intend to spend the remainder of our lives together, ensuring you never again doubt how deeply and completely you are valued. News of their engagement spread through society considerably differently than the announcement of her previous betrothal had unfolded months earlier. Rather than whispered scandal and careful skepticism, this news arrived amid genuine celebration, society having witnessed firsthand the authentic connection that had grown steadily between Elara and Ristan throughout recent months, in stark contrast to the hollow arrangement that had characterized her engagement to Alaric. Margaret was among the first to offer heartfelt congratulations. Arriving at Elara's home, the very afternoon news of the engagement became known throughout their social circle. Elara, I am overjoyed for you, she exclaimed, embracing her friend warmly. After everything you endured, you truly deserve this happiness. Thank you, Margaret. Your support throughout this entire journey meant more to me than I can adequately express. I only wish you continued happiness moving forward, Margaret said sincerely. Duke Blackwood clearly adores you, Elara. I have never seen a man look at anyone the way he looks at you. Even Elara's younger brother Edwin, who had voiced such frustration during the darkest days following her broken engagement, expressed genuine delight at the news. I told you, Alaric never deserved you, he said with a satisfied grin. Duke Blackwood, however, seems to understand your worth completely. The elder Duke Blackwood, despite his initial resistance, arrived personally to offer his formal congratulations, his demeanor considerably warmer than during their earlier tense luncheon. I confess, Lady Elara, I harbored genuine reservations regarding this match initially, he admitted candidly. Yet witnessing my son's happiness these past months, and recognizing the genuine strength of character you possess, I find myself fully embracing this union now, without reservation. Thank you, Your Grace, Elara replied warmly. Your acceptance means a great deal to both Ristan and myself. Even Alaric, upon hearing the news through mutual acquaintances, sent a brief but genuine letter of congratulations, expressing sincere hope for their future happiness together, a gesture that Elara appreciated as a final, meaningful resolution to whatever lingering tension had existed between them since their broken engagement. Vivienne, notably, remained conspicuously absent from any public acknowledgement of the engagement, her earlier schemes having ultimately failed to prevent the genuine happiness Elara had found with Ristan. As preparations began for their upcoming wedding, Elara found herself reflecting frequently on the remarkable journey that had brought her to this moment. From the devastating humiliation of her engagement ball to the genuine joy of Ristan's heartfelt proposal within his family's beautiful garden. She recognized now, with clarity she had lacked throughout those earlier painful months, that sometimes the most difficult moments in life ultimately lead toward outcomes far more meaningful than anything originally anticipated, provided one possesses sufficient courage to choose authenticity over convenient obligation. Ristan, for his part, found himself equally reflective during this period, grateful beyond measure for the unexpected series of events that had led him toward genuine love with a woman whose strength and grace had captured his attention from that very first terrace conversation. He recognized clearly now that his earlier caution and careful deliberation, while perhaps understandable given his own difficult family history, had nearly cost him the opportunity to recognize and pursue genuine happiness when it finally presented itself so unexpectedly within his life. Together, they began planning their future with genuine excitement and anticipation, confident that the foundation they had built through honesty, mutual respect, and unwavering support throughout numerous challenges would sustain them through whatever obstacles life might yet present as husband and wife. The morning of the wedding arrived, bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the windows of Elara's childhood bedroom, as Bridget helped her prepare for the most significant day of her life. The contrast between this quiet, joyful morning and the anxious dread she had felt preparing for her engagement ball months earlier struck Elara powerfully as she stood before her mirror, watching her lady's maid carefully arrange her hair with practiced skill. "You look absolutely radiant, my lady," Bridget said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "Duke Blackwood is a fortunate man indeed." "I believe I am equally fortunate, Bridget," Elara replied, smiling warmly at her reflection. "I never imagined I would feel such genuine excitement standing here today, given everything that transpired last year." Her mother entered shortly afterward, her eyes glistening with emotion as she took in the sight of her daughter, dressed in a stunning gown of ivory silk, delicate lace adorning the sleeves and bodice, a simple yet elegant tiara resting atop her carefully arranged curls. "Elara, you look absolutely beautiful," she said, embracing her daughter carefully, to avoid disturbing her careful preparation. "Thank you, Mother. I could not have reached this day without your support throughout everything that happened." "You reached this day through your own courage, Elara," her mother corrected gently. "I simply had the privilege of watching you find your way toward genuine happiness, even when circumstances seemed most difficult." Her father joined them shortly afterward, visibly moved as he beheld his daughter prepared for her wedding day. "You look exactly like your mother did on our own wedding day," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I am prouder of you than words can adequately express, Elara. Not simply for the woman you are marrying today, but for the strength and integrity you demonstrated throughout everything leading toward this moment." "Thank you, Father," Elara said, embracing him warmly. "Your support meant everything to me, particularly during those difficult early days." The small family gathered together for a few final quiet moments before departing toward the church, where Ristan already awaited her arrival, having chosen a modest but beautiful venue that reflected both families' preferences for genuine celebration over ostentatious display. As Elara's carriage approached the church, she could see numerous familiar faces gathering outside, friends and family eager to witness the culmination of a courtship that had captured considerable attention throughout society over recent months. Margaret waited near the church entrance, practically bouncing with excitement as Elara stepped down from the carriage. "Elara, you look absolutely stunning," she exclaimed, embracing her friend carefully. "I am so genuinely happy for you." "Thank you for everything, Margaret. Your friendship carried me through some of the most difficult moments of the past year. That is what friends are for, Margaret replied warmly. Now, let us get you inside, before Duke Blackwood grows too impatient waiting at the altar. As Alara entered the church on her father's arm, the assembled guests rose respectfully, though she found her attention immediately drawn toward the altar, where Ristan waited, dressed in formal attire that emphasized his imposing, yet graceful bearing. His expression, as their eyes met across the length of the aisle, radiated such genuine joy and adoration that Alara felt tears threatening to gather, despite her earlier resolve to maintain composure throughout the ceremony. The walk down the aisle felt simultaneously endless and far too brief, every step bringing her closer toward the man who had shown her, through consistent honesty and unwavering support, exactly what genuine partnership could look like when built upon authentic connection rather than convenient obligation. When her father finally placed her hand within Ristan's own, she felt an overwhelming sense of rightness settle over her, as though every difficult moment throughout the preceding months had ultimately led toward exactly this destination. "You look breathtaking," Ristan whispered, as they turned together to face the officiant, his voice carrying quiet wonder despite the formal setting. "You look rather dashing yourself," Alara whispered back, earning a warm smile that she knew, without needing to look, likely mirrored her own expression completely. The ceremony proceeded with quiet dignity, both of them speaking their vows with genuine conviction that carried far beyond mere formal recitation, each word reflecting the authentic commitment they had built together through months of honest courtship. When the officiant finally pronounced them husband and wife, the assembled guests erupted into genuine, enthusiastic applause, a celebration that felt considerably more heartfelt than the polite, performative reactions that had characterized her previous engagement announcement. The wedding breakfast that followed proved equally joyful, filled with genuine laughter and warm conversation among family and close friends who had witnessed firsthand the remarkable journey that had led toward this happy occasion. Even the elder Duke Blackwood, whose initial reservations had once threatened to complicate their path toward marriage, appeared genuinely delighted throughout the celebration, offering a heartfelt toast that acknowledged, with evident sincerity, how thoroughly Alara had proven herself worthy of joining their family. "I confess," the elder Duke said, raising his glass toward the assembled guests. "I harbored certain reservations when my son first informed me of his intentions toward Lady Alara. Having witnessed her strength of character, her genuine kindness, and the remarkable happiness she has brought into my son's life these past months, I can say without reservation that I could not have chosen a more worthy match myself, had the decision been entirely mine to make." The guests applauded warmly at this heartfelt acknowledgement, and Alara felt genuine gratitude toward the man whose initial skepticism had ultimately given way toward complete acceptance, understanding that his journey toward embracing her as part of the family mirrored, in many ways, her own journey, toward recognizing that genuine happiness required courage to pursue, regardless of whatever obstacles society or circumstance might place along the way. As the celebration continued into the afternoon, Alara found herself briefly alone with Ristan near a quiet corner of the garden where the wedding breakfast had been arranged, both of them taking a momentary respite from the joyful chaos of well-wishing guests. "Can you believe we have finally reached this moment?" she asked, leaning contentedly against his shoulder as they watched their families and friends celebrating together nearby. "I confess, there were moments throughout this past year when I wondered whether circumstances might prevent us from ever reaching this day," Ristan admitted, wrapping his arm gently around her waist. "Yet here we stand, having faced considerable challenges together, emerging with our connection stronger than I ever imagined possible. I am grateful for every challenge we faced, strange as that may sound," Alara reflected, smiling softly. "Without my broken engagement to Alaric, I might never have discovered you standing alone on that terrace, might never have recognized what genuine partnership could truly feel like. Perhaps difficult circumstances sometimes lead us toward exactly where we are meant to be," Ristan suggested, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. "I certainly believe that to be true in our case, Alara. Every obstacle we faced together only strengthened my certainty that you represent everything I could ever hope for in a life partner." They remained together in comfortable silence for several more moments, watching the joyful celebration unfolding around them, both acutely aware of how remarkably their circumstances had transformed since that devastating evening at her engagement ball months earlier. What had once seemed like the beginning of a painful, obligation-bound future had instead led toward genuine love, built through honesty, mutual respect, and unwavering support through numerous challenges that might have easily destroyed a less genuine connection. As evening approached and the wedding celebration gradually wound toward its conclusion, Ilara and Ristan prepared to depart for their honeymoon, a journey toward the countryside estate where they intended to spend several peaceful weeks together before returning to city life and their responsibilities as newly married Duke and Duchess. As their carriage pulled away from the church, guests waving warmly from the entrance, Ilara glanced back one final time, taking in the sight of everyone who had supported her throughout this remarkable journey toward genuine happiness. Turning back toward Ristan, she found him watching her with the same warm, adoring expression that had first captured her attention on that terrace so many months earlier, an expression that promised continued devotion and genuine partnership throughout whatever future awaited them together. She smiled, settling comfortably against him as their carriage carried them toward their new life together, grateful beyond measure for the courage that had allowed her to choose authenticity over convenient obligation, and for the remarkable man whose steady, genuine affection had shown her exactly what true partnership could look like when built upon honesty, mutual respect, and unwavering devotion. Their story, which had begun amid public humiliation and heartbreak, had ultimately transformed into a testament to genuine love's ability to flourish, even under the most difficult circumstances, provided both partners possessed sufficient courage and honesty to nurture it properly. As their carriage disappeared into the gathering evening light, carrying them toward a future built on authentic partnership rather than mere convenient arrangement, Ilara felt nothing but genuine peace and profound gratitude for the remarkable journey that had finally led her toward the true happiness she had once feared might remain forever beyond her reach.